Last week, I announced that I would be having a series of discussions on the question of rape following that heinous gang rape in Delhi, India, which sparked worldwide outrage. On today's Plain Talk, I've got Swami Aksharananda, principal of the Saraswati Vidya Niketan High School. Swami has an MBA, an MA in Sanskrit from Banaras Hindu University, and a PhD in Hindu Studies from the University of Madison, Wisconsin. He's currently engaged in some exchanges of correspondence in the newspapers on the question of rape. Swami, welcome to Plain Talk.
Thank you very much.
And thanks very much for accepting my invitation.
It's my pleasure.
Slightly personal, what qualifies a person to be called a Swami?
It's essentially a calling. One has to, or technically one has to be ordained in a particular order. There are several monastic orders in India, and one goes through some processes of ordination and initiation, and one is made a Swami. But of course, it's also a spiritual discipline that one is part of, you know. The fact that you dedicate yourself entirely to celibate life is what is also part of the whole.
Of all these orders, or that's peculiar to
of
them?
all. Once you're a monk, once you're a Swami, you celibate. You might have had a family life at one time.
Yeah.
But then there comes a stage. So there are two types of monks in India: those who pass through a normal family life, and the later part of their lives, they decided that they will now move on into this specific phase. And there are those who do not necessarily have to go through that family phase of life and enter monastic order. So both of them are quite common in India.
Apart from that, you're also a teacher.
I am. I've always been.
When you say you've always been, in what?
Well, even when I was a student, I was teaching fellow students, and then I officially became a teacher as a young person. You know, in those days,
Yes.
Almost immediately.
Rite of passage.
Almost immediately after high school, everybody became a teacher, and that was my thing. And then I remained in that profession, and I developed myself, went on to study and so on. But I came back and I continued teaching.
You are quoted as saying that all over the world, the one single most destructive threat to human peace and prosperity is the quest for conversion. I think you were speaking of religion.
Yeah.
Where's the evidence that this is such a destructive threat?
Well, it is, conversion is built upon, is premised on a mindset. I think that's what's the problem. A mindset that dictates that the truth is something that is curtailed. The truth is found in a single book. The truth is something that is finite, that it has been given once and for all, that it is absolute, that it is non-negotiable. So that concept of truth is what fuels conversion, and that is what I'm talking about as being the danger that promotes conversionism.
So when you say destructive, did you mean it in the physical?
Yeah, physically also, we have had enormous evidences historically of people seeking to convert. I mean, even within, if you were to look at the history of Europe, you'll see that there have been all these religious wars where one sect has been seeking to convert in Islam, one sect has been seeking to convert. So wherever conversion has gone, it has not gone without physical force.
That's particularly true of the colonies, the old world.
That's right too.
And it was also true in India?
Yes, to the extent that the Islamic invasions of India were in part to make India Islamic. Yes, that has never gone without physical force.
But the more recent, or is it happening at the same time? You've got Christian.
The physical force is not there anymore, but there are other subtleties that are at play, and they played a part in this whole thing.
No, I was getting at the issue of Christianity now, the introduction of Christianity in India. Do you see that as a threat to India? Well, and the fabric of Hindu society?
Yes, I do, because you see, India for the first time was confronted with two fundamental ideologies that were diametrically opposed to its own indigenous way of understanding truth. You see, because if you look at the situation in India, you find that there was always a ferment of religious thought and openness to religious thinking, and an absolute freedom where religious thought was concerned. But for the first time, with the introduction of Islam and Christianity in India,
Islam would be centuries ago, some centuries ago.
yeah, but the basic premise is the same, that there is a single book, there is a possessor of this truth, there's a monopoly of this truth, and that was what, you know, that struck the Hindu so strange, that whereas we have this view that truth is an open-ended thing, here comes a thinking for the first time that you're exposed to something like this that says, hey, truth is confined in a book, one person knows it, everybody else is wrong, everybody else goes to hell who doesn't have this truth. This was something that was extraordinarily, that made an impact on the Hindu mind.
But is it because of the clash of the philosophy? Hinduism, and you'll tell me if I'm right or wrong, is polytheistic. Christianity, Judaism, Islam, monotheistic. And is it really a clash of that philosophical underpinning?
Well, we are saying that even if it were, and I'll come to that moment, even if it were, the closeness of the whole philosophy was what was important, was interesting. Incidentally, there has been no monotheism in the world in history that has not had or did not have to have the support of state. Monotheism and politics go hand in hand wherever it has happened. So if you look at the first attempt at historically introducing monotheism, in Egypt, for example, in the great pharaoh called Akhenaten, he initiated monotheism, and made it a law of the state. Of course, subsequent pharaohs changed that. But later on, everywhere that monotheism became dominant, it had to have become dominant only with the power of the state behind it.
That reminds me of what Jesus Christ said, render unto Caesar the things that are Caesar, and unto God. He was trying to draw a distinction there, wasn't he?
I think so. Of course, some people disagree with those distinctions, but yes. And I think it's an important thing in terms of separating, law from dogma, religious dogma, that is, religious teachings. Some religions don't make that separation between what is legal and what is spiritual. And I think that is perhaps one of the issues that we are facing in the world today.
I think you're right. Yes, you've got the Church of England, you've got the Roman Catholic Church was very much, in fact, it was like government of the world. But isn't India itself, religion is interwoven in the state and in politics, state in the broad sense of the word?
Well, yes. You see, there's a two kinds of relationship that you have to look at. There was the authority of the king, right, and the authority of the spiritual people. There was not an interference. The king always sought the advice of the spiritual leaders, right? But there was not the king was allowed to implement and to carry on, providing, of course, that the fundamentals of what we call dharma, and dharma is not religion in this sense, that whatever contributed to the maintaining, the support and nurturing, the upholding of society, of human life, what contributed to the support and maintenance of the cosmos for the entire environment, that could not have been violated. But so to that extent there was a unity, but from all other perspectives there was a separation of the power of the state did not have the interference of the spiritual people. As a matter of fact, it was not an official legalized thing. The spiritual people were never really part of the state power as such.
Iran. We say that in these other states to support their religion, they need the backing of the state. But isn't Iran a place where you have your political leader and you have your spiritual leader? We hear about that, Ahmadinejad and the current spiritual leader. And they're very separate, and often they clash.
Well,
Is that an exception?
I don't think it is as distinct and as separate as it might appear. But having said that, the so-called spiritual people also still exercise legal power in the state, and I think this is where the difference lies. They do also have, as a matter of fact, if I'm not mistaken, the political state of Iran has to genuflect to the spiritual power.
That's correct, yes. Do you subscribe, Swami, to the theory and the belief that there must be separation between church and state? In other words, the church must be irreligious. The state must be irreligious, or as our constitution says, secular.
In the present context, you see, let me just back up. We are not going to make absolute judgments. In Hinduism, at least we are warned about that, to avoid absolute judgments. But given the circumstance in which we are, yes, I would be in favor of a secular state.
Because this is what our constitution, in fact, calls for.
Right.
Do we, in fact, have it when the churches, the religious community, can say to the president, even when a constitutional amendment is passed, that they don't want it? Is that proper?
They can say it, but the state does not have to comply.
Do you think?
Because we are free to say anything. People can lobby, they can make the demands for changes, they can make demand for laws. But, I mean, the lawmakers have to decide. Of course, take into consideration the pulse of the nation and so on.
But the constitution still must prevail, is it?
Obviously.
What was your position, Swami? And I didn't do the research on this. What was your position on the sexual orientation provision that was passed in the constitution, but President Jagdeo then refused to assent?
I would rather not want to get into any specific details about personalities, but in a general sense.
No, I'm speaking about, purely as an example.
My personal view is that people, we, from a Hindu point of view, and personally also, we really are not troubled by people's sexual orientations. It does not constitute an abomination for me. It does not constitute a violation of, as some people say, it is a violation of God. For us, it is not so. You can't violate God. You can't, So from a Hindu, primarily from a Hindu point of view, it is not an abomination for us. We're not going to go and promote a particular lifestyle.
But you wouldn't pronounce judgment?
No, far from it. We would not do that. And I would support an individual in his or her quest for her own integrity. I will have absolutely no problem in saying that I stand by you.
You mentioned God just now. Now, given our paradigm, our education, our thinking, we tend to think of God as all-powerful, all-knowing, all-everything. How does that fit in with the Hindu concept of God, which polytheistic? It's many gods?
Well, let me interject here. You see, the words like polytheism and monotheism really can't apply to India, right? The situations are much more complex than simplistic terms like polytheism and monotheism.
No, but we're talking about God here, rather than just India,
right,
or any country.
So, in a sense, you can say that we don't speak of one God or many God. For us, we speak of God only. So we do Hindus say that God is one or God is many, right? Because we understand the concept of divinity to exclude every possibility that one can think about.
To exclude?
To include every possibility that one can think about. This is our concept of the divinity cannot be closed, right? This is our whole idea. This idea where I think that Hinduism has an important lesson to teach the rest of the world. That it cannot be closed. It has to be inclusive of everything, male, female, black, white, young, old. That is why we don't have a problem with a notion of God as being feminine. Whereas in the dominant patriarchal systems of the world, you can't even begin to imagine God as a feminine.
Now let me take you back to this business of the conversion.
Mm-hmm.
If one believes that one's religion is the best, is there not a duty to promote it among non-believers?
Promote but proselytize. There's a difference. We can discuss, we can talk about our ideas, but you see I personally, and there are Hindus who will differ with me, but I completely go against the idea of conversion of any kind whatsoever, right? Because I tell Hindu brothers and sisters who want to convert, I said, unless you have a thorough understanding of what you want to reject, because people say they don't understand Hinduism. So that can't be the reason. If you don't understand something, why do you reject it? You can only reject what you understand.
Well, people, there is the intellectual and there's the emotional response.
Well, this is why we try to say that because it is not only an emotional thing, it must also be, there must be some reason involved. Of course, people make those judgments, and it happens all the time, whether we want or not. But I'm saying that it has to be it has to be a conscious choice that I'm making to change my religion. And so I'm saying to the Hindu that, are you satisfied about about your Hinduism in the sense that, have you made a thorough knowledge of it, have a thorough understanding of it, and therefore on that basis reject it? If that is the case, I have no problem. I also, why should one want to be part of to convert? Conversion for me, and I think Mahatma Gandhi has the same perspective, should mean one thing and one thing only, that a person is seeking God. If there are other reasons why people convert, and I understand that, but I'm saying that if this is the only reason why one should convert, that is to seek God, well then how are you sure? Have you really exhausted your search for God where you are? If you can tell me that, look, as a Hindu, I have done everything. I have searched completely. I have, exhausted all efforts in understanding and in reaching God in Hinduism, and I am running into a wall all the time, and I can only see God over there, I would say go right ahead.
Do you think the Hindu teachers from days gone by have done a good job in informing and educating even Hindus about their religion?
Oh, I think so. I think so. If we are talking about from the very beginning, education has been a very important thing. You see,
I'm speaking now of Guyana, and though it does take place in India as well, but I'm thinking of...
Well, one has to take everything into context. I mean, we got to take our colonial experience into context. The fact that the people who migrated from India were not scholars, they were ordinary laboring, working people. And
you did have some Brahmins in the higher caste.
But Brahmins, I'm not so sure that Brahmins were of different kinds. There are Brahmins who were intellectuals, but I'm not so sure we had Brahmins of that caliber who came to the colony, you see. So one has to take into consideration the population we're dealing with. And given that, I think they have done a very good job.
You say they. Yeah. Is it, and I'm going to get off the subject fairly quickly, but is it not correct to say that many persons were open to conversion to escape the indignities and the restrictions of the caste system?
It is interesting. We can't have a discussion on Hinduism without talking about the caste system.
Is it very much a part of Hinduism, the caste system?
Well, caste is not an Indian word. Caste is a Portuguese word. It's a European experience that was imposed upon a phenomenon that I did not quite understand in India. Of course, and you know that the whole development and crystallization of caste, as it is known now, is a colonial, is an Orientalist construction.
Well, if I may use maybe the Mahatmas were untouchables, I think. I think that's the word I use.
Any system that dehumanizes a human being is of course is unacceptable, and so if there is a social system within Hinduism that puts down any human being, male, female, or whatever, then it is wrong, and it has to be changed.
You say if. Is there?
Well, my hesitation is because I'm not so sure that we completely understand the phenomenon, right? So to the extent that we do not understand, that is why I'm a little hesitant, and I'm premising with if, right? Yes, but having said that, I'm not so sure that people who have converted in India, let us take Dalits or the untouchables,
yes,
who have become Christians, they really escaped their indignity of their previous position. Because the Christian church in India is equally ridden with untouchability.
On the question of India, Arundhati Roy said India has lost its innocence. You know, the days of the Ravi Shankar and Harris, where you went to India for spiritual reawakening. Does that India still exist?
Of course. India means many things to many people. I mean, one has to take into consideration that Arundhati Roy is a Christian woman who has her agenda, right? But yes,
what is the agenda? Do you mean that disparagingly, or isn't she a social rights activist?
Well, yeah, you can say so, but an activist who always and invariably finds herself against Hinduism.
Against Hinduism?
Yeah, so one has to take that with some, in perspective, right? But having said that, yes, I would say that India is still a place where you can, perhaps if there's any part in the world today where one can go for that kind of spiritual realization, still available, it's India.
The literature recounts the prevalence of sexual violence and domestic abuse in the Indo-Caribbean community during and in the post-indentureship period, when embrace of religion, either Islam or Hinduism, was still strong among the immigrants. How do you explain that? Why was there so much violence then and now?
I do not think, violence is wrong in any kind of violence, so especially the sexual violence. It was there. I think that also sociologically and historically, because of I'm sure you know part of our history, that women were basically one quarter of the number of people brought from India, and so that posed.
I didn't even think it was that many.
Yeah,
as many as 1 in 4. I thought it was less.
Well, at some point in time it was less,
yeah.
But when you take the overall thing
yes,
into consideration, so that itself posed a serious social problem in the society. That is not excusing anything, but it did pose a problem where there was a lot of competition among men. And it led to violence, a great deal of violence in the early phase of our colonial history here in Guyana. But I don't think that our life was any more violent than what we find anywhere else in the world. I don't know if there are any statistics that supports that.
Well, I am relying on I learned from this morning's newspapers. One of my recent guests, Mr. Tony Martin, Professor Tony Martin, has died rather suddenly. I was thinking of his book where he pointed out, in terms of percentages of the population of Indians versus the others, there was more violence and killings among the Indian community?
At that early stage, I wouldn't know, seriously wouldn't know that, Chris, if I mean, what the statistics were. But obviously, from a Hindu point of view, it had nothing to do with religion. It might have been a social or cultural thing.
Yes.
Because we are also, we've also come from a male-dominated society. We're also patriarchal, right? And that man thing to dominate and to control a woman was part of the Hindu thing as well.
Yes, India still remains a largely patriarchal society.
It is a patriarchal society. It is a male-dominated society.
Again, I've been reading about this organization, Jahaji Sisters. You must have heard about it?
Jahaji Sisters.
Yes. It was formed in the U.S. It's a U.S. Caribbean organization to support Indian women leadership development, prevention of gender-based oppression, advocating for their politicization. Do we have any similar kind of organization in Guyana that you think, and if we do, how effective?
I'm not so sure whether among Hindus we had an effort by Raihan Shah many years ago that was actually, that didn't get very far, where they were trying to focus on women. And but I don't think that after that we've had anything. I understand some of the religious organizations may have their women's group within them, but I'm not so sure about the extent of their social involvement. There is a fledgling attempt to start a Hindu women's organization, part of which is to focus on issues affecting, social issues, wider social issues, not only for women but for society as a whole. But as I said, it's a new effort, and of which I'm part, in assisting to formulate and get going. And I hope that maybe in time, it will play a role in our society.
To what extent, both at the level of the school and in terms of the temple and your leadership role in the temple, do you advocate a more conscious, more tolerant, and equality of relationship between male and female?
My God, I don't know if advocate. Sometimes I demand it. I mean, it is more than just advocate. Yes, that's part of my, because right now, if you look at Hinduism, the way it is managed in Guyana, you will see some structures. You look at almost every temple, and the movers and shakers of every temple are the women. I mean, women play an important part in every temple in this country. You go to any religious function, and it is the women you see.
They're doing all the work, but is there a glass ceiling?
I don't think so. When you say they do all the work, yeah.
All the activity, the organization, you go to every function, they seem to be so... They're the ones who support the temples.
There are secretaries and presidents also, and that is beginning to happen more and more, right? In my temple, for example, and temples in which I have some influence, most of the ritual performances are now with children, among whom girls are dominant.
What percentage of the students in your school is female?
Well, we have 258 girls and 158 boys.
But that says it.
Uh-huh.
The level of violence in Guyana still, you pick up the newspapers, it's very depressing. Somebody gets killed, why do you think there is so much domestic violence in Guyana? And do you think there's a disproportionate evidence of it among Hindus?
I'm not so sure. You see, the whole thing, we look at this thing from a personal point of view also. We look at violence as a kind of an issue because it comes from something we call anger or growth, right? As something that one has to deal with. Yes, we need legislation, and we need legislation to help us come out of all of this, but at the same time, we also have to operate at a personal level, that if I want change, I must be able to transform my own personal
You must be
life.
the change.
Yes, and that is a challenge I pose to myself and to others, that we want change in society, but we must not only talk about it, we must not request change of the others. I have to live my truth. I have to live that change. And
Was it Gandhi who said, be the change you want to be?
I think so, yeah. But Hinduism places the emphasis on social transformation on the individual. So that is why in my discussion with these people on the rape issue, I'm saying why excuse the man from the responsibility? Why pretending as if this man is merely a victim of his passions and he has absolutely no control over that?
Yeah.
You know, and I'm saying no. We have to look at ourselves first of all. So transformation, social transformation begins with me. Spiritual transformation begins with me. This is how I see it.
You mentioned legislation. We have fairly strong domestic violence legislation, sexual offences legislation. Are you satisfied that they're working effectively? And the mechanisms to support the legislation are in fact there?
I'm not so sure about all the details of it, but let us look at it one way. No matter, in any society, no matter what the legislation is, legislation means people who have to implement them. Legislation means people who have to work them out. And if we have people with a certain mindset about women in the society, if you have a police officer who believes that it's okay to hit a woman, if you have a judge, if you have a magistrate, if you have a prosecutor, all of whom are going to say, you know, it's all right, then...
Increasingly these days you're seeing priests and pastors, etc., being involved as well.
So you see, so it's that mindset that we have to deal with. Of course, at all levels. I'm not saying that we need to exclude legislation and law, but more importantly, we have to do it at the level of the society, of education. And that is where I believe our challenge lies, and I believe that that's where we have the best chance of success, when we begin to educate our people, ourselves, who must be the examples of all of that. And I think that, you know, we have a better chance of...
Do you think alcohol triggers domestic violence?
I think it plays a part. I think that we are not totally... I don't drink, so I don't know, but I don't know if you take it, you might be able to...
I don't either, so I can't help.
But from what I understand and follow and read and so on, one is not in full control of one's faculties when one is under the influence of liquor. And that is why many people claim that they're sorry. But if you're not in full control, then we saying, as a matter of fact, we have our youth group, and one of the pledges we ask them to make, among other things, no eating of beef, no consumption of alcohol, not to serve it, not to be around where it is served, not to be part of it, you see. And it's all dealing with young people. So yes, I believe that alcohol plays a part, and I believe that we also need to education to help in that respect.
Let's turn to the exchange of letters which you hinted at just now on the question of rape. Now, we all know this 23-year-old student in Delhi. You seem to have taken particular objection to a letter in the press from a Muslim leader about the way women should dress. That seems to have incensed you. Is that too strong a word?
Incense is perhaps too strong a word. It concerns me because, years ago Martin Luther King says that a person's character should not be judged by the color of his skin.
But the
I'm
content
saying
of his
that
character.
you can't judge a person on the clothes. If you can't judge a person's character by the color of the skin, how less are you in a position?
Well,
to
you
judge?
have less. You have no choice on the color of your skin.
Yeah.
You do have about the clothes you wear.
Yeah. So it's even less a basis to judge a person's character on the clothes he or she wears. To me, it baffles my mind.
But
because there is an assumption, there is a judgment on the person. Because if you read all of these letters, there is an assumption that that a woman is opening herself to being sexually violated if she dresses in a particular fashion. Some people are now saying that, there isn't a cause, it's a correlation. It's not a correlation, it's a factor. Well, we're playing on words here. Yeah. Essentially, this is what they're saying. And that is where my additional disagreement with that concept is when it seems to be given the support of Holy Word. I think, where the claim is made that it is the position of my religion, it is the position of the holy text. I think that is that is where I.
No, but if it is so, if that is the position of the holy text, and the person is a follower of that religion.
Well, once the idea comes into public domain, it has to be examined.
And you feel that this exchange between you and Abu Bakr principally, I noticed Ms. Raihan Shaw has also been, has that really helped the discussion, or it now makes it look as though it's Swami Aksharananda versus Abu Bakr, and it's a spectacle?
Well, I was afraid of that, but if you notice my letters, I don't write one every day. I don't know where these people find the time. But I'm happy to see that that Raihan Shah has come into the picture, and she's an educated person. She has a perspective which is respected, and she has made some pronouncements. And then others have now come aboard as well. So it is not just Raihan anymore, but some other female who I think have now come on board.
On Plain Talk this evening, I'm talking with Swami Aksharananda, principal of the Saraswati Vidya Niketan High School, and leader of the Hindu community. We're discussing the issue of rape and religion generally. We'll be right back.
No, we ain't giving up no mountain. No, we ain't giving up no tree. We ain't giving up no river that belongs to we. Not the one blue sake, not one rice grain, not one for us, not a blade of grass. This land is our land now. We're gonna make it some.
Welcome back to Plain Talk with Swami Aksharananda. There have been at least 10 more gruesome rapes in India reported in the past month, following the one we talked about in Delhi. Why do you think rape is so prevalent in India? Even if it's true of other countries, why is it so prevalent in India? And gang rape, one hears it a lot in.
Well, I would not single out India as such. I think it's a universal phenomenon. It has been part of human culture from the very beginning, wherever the patriarchy has been dominant. We see it's a male-dominated society. Women are increasingly becoming mobile in society. They are challenging all the stereotypes. Women in India are moving into greater and greater positions of power and authority in industry, in commerce, in politics. And I'm sure that is probably causing some concern. And of course, this fear of women and is probably what is propelling some of these reactions.
So you see it as a reaction to by men, the male society, to protect itself.
It may not be a very conscious thing, but yes, I think that the people who go out and rape don't say I'm raping you because of this.
But it's out of a mindset, a paradigm. One Indian commentator recently wrote that Hindu jurisprudence had no law that considered rape a recognizable offense, and it was the British in 1860 who introduced it in the Indian Penal Code. Some people even argue, Swami, that Hindu scriptures actually tolerate, if not encourage, rape. How do you respond to that?
That is unfathomable for me, that to tolerate. Here, regardless of what Scripture says, we are now in a position. You see, the thing about Hindu Scripture is that, unlike other scriptures, we are not bound. It is contextual. We have to understand everything in relation and in context. Okay? So I'm saying that whatever a scripture may have said 500 years ago or 5,000 years ago, we are at a different time now. And things are supposed to be understood in a different time. There's a greater understanding now of rights of an individual, of human rights, more and more. We have the Universal Declaration of Human Rights. It's not a perfect document, but it's perhaps the best thing that we have universally. So I'm saying that regardless of what a particular religion may have said at any time, and where Hinduism gives the person the open, is Hinduism itself is saying that don't look at me as a fossil, as a, locked in time. Okay, that Hinduism is a constantly growing phenomenon, expanding phenomenon, and this is how we understand all Hindu texts. I am not au fait with Hindu jurisprudence as such, but outside of the legal thing, there is nowhere in Hinduism as such that one can say rape is tolerated or accepted.
I came across a comment from a tribunal that said it's inconceivable that you don't like the word, the high caste, highly placed Indian would rape a Dalit. So is something wrong with the system then?
No. It is not. It is a system of power. It is whether a white man in America could rape a black slave. I mean, it is a system of power. It has nothing to do with me being a Dalit and you being an upper caste. It's a power relationship that is going on. Unfortunately,
a different manifestation, on a manifestation, yes.
And it comes in this form, right? If that Dalit had been someone else, or that high caste, upper caste person had been someone else, the same power play would have been there.
You raised, for my own information and probably for the viewers, we talked about the Hindu religious text. Is there a single text like for the Christians, there's the Bible, for the Muslims, there's the Quran, for the Jews, there's the Torah. Is there a single Hindu text that is the pronouncement of the absolute truth?
Thank God there is no such text in Hinduism. Because Hinduism will tell you that absolute, first of all, the concept of absolute truth is a troubling one for us. You can say Hinduism in some way is like science, because science does not speak of an absolute truth. Science is a quest for truth, quest for understanding. And I think this is how I see Hinduism, as a constant inquiry. If Hinduism commands of anything of its followers is this viveka, to inquire, to know, to question. Because all the spiritual teachers have encouraged questioning. As a matter of fact, the Bhagavad Gita, 80 verse of the 700 verses, more than 10% of them are questions. We have a whole Upanishad that is called Prashna Upanishad, the Upanishad of questions. You have the whole the episode in the Mahabharata with the Yaksha.
And those are all religious books?
Yeah. And I'll come back to that just now. The episode in the Mahabharata of the Yaksha, which is all question and answers all the time. So there is no single book in Hinduism, and I think that has to do with how Hinduism understands truth. The truth cannot be comprehended and circumscribed within the covers of any book. And so because one is constantly exploring, one is constantly discovering, every time a new discovery is made, it becomes a text, it becomes a book. And this is why we have many in Hinduism.
Yes, you said you were going to come back to it.
Well, this is exactly the point I wanted to make, that we don't have a single book because truth is of that nature that it cannot be contained within a single book.
We talked about the economic factors that can drive rape, maybe the sociological factors that can drive rape, the cultural, the caste system. Rape also seems to have been, well, we know it's been part of wars over the millennia. Mm-hmm. You kill the men and you rape and you. rape seems to be part of the Hindu-Muslim conflict, which, and I'm going to mention this specifically, Hindu girls being targeted for rape in Pakistan and Bangladesh, particularly the Sindh province. In 2010, the Asian Human Rights Commission said that some 20 to 25 Hindu women are forcibly converted and sexually assaulted every month. Does that bother you in any sense, in any other than the general sense that rape does? So yes, you're concerned about rape, but look at the factors now driving it.
Yeah, let me put it this way, that whenever there has been conflicts in India, let us take India, that whoever been involved in this conflict, you said historically in wars, that rape has always played a part in it, right? Because the way I can humiliate you, this is the thinking, this is how the thinking goes. I humiliate you by raping, quote unquote, your woman, right? So this is how it has gone on. The liberation war in Bangladesh, that's an episode of rape that is hardly being talked about.
That's correct.
Right?
That's correct.
It is perhaps the worst episode of rape, large-scale military rape that is known anywhere in the world. So rape goes on. Where my concern is, where one invokes religion to support it, one invokes a holy book to support it. This is where.
Well, does anyone do that? Use a holy book to support rape?
As a form of punishment, yes. It is not only Hindu women who are penalized. If you look at what goes on, if you look at the infamous or the famous case of Mukhtar Bai, for example, this Pakistani woman who was raped, her rape was clearly stated by the people who oversaw it and had it implemented that it was a punishment for her violation of the religious norm. So people are.
And what would have been that religious norm?
Well, in this case, her brother, because she was a woman, and she was a teacher.
Yes.
And that was a problem. Just like how this young girl Malala is involved in pushing education. There is a mentality, I'm not saying it's widespread, but there's a mentality that is very dominant that says it wants to keep women in their place. So I'm saying that I'm not going to say that because a Hindu woman is raped in Pakistan, it is different from a Muslim woman being raped. It's both sides are involved in this thing. But where I think I will have a concern is whenever it is justified in the name of a particular religion. That it is okay to rape an infidel, because this is what we do to infidels. And wherever a text is interpreted.
You're touching there on Islam and Muslim.
An unbeliever. We punish an unbeliever, we punish an infidel, because God punishes an infidel, God punishes an unbeliever, and this is what we do to an unbeliever. And of course, where an unbeliever happens to be a woman, God forbid it, one form of her punishment is her humiliation in the form of rape.
What precisely was your concern with the letters you had, the exchanges with the Muslim leaders? And did you see it as a religious difference? Did you see it as a humanitarian issue, sociological, or what?
Well, it is all of those things. One, because as I said at the beginning, I do not believe a person's character can be judged by the dress she wears. I do not believe that a woman invites rape by wearing a particular kind of clothes, because the evidence is so clear that it has nothing to do with that. And I brought up the example of the Islamic societies only to show this point, not to put down anybody, that here you have women in the Islamic societies, Pakistan, Iran, who are raped also, and they follow the traditional mode of dress. So dress has nothing to do with rape. So this is my first point I'm making. Of course, people have their disagreement and they go on. But you see, you're locked in an argument if you accept this position as coming from a text that is supposed to be, or you interpret it to be, the verbatim word of God. That is literal verbatim word of God. I'm saying you are locking yourself in a position. So it now, this is where the religious argument comes in now. This is where I have my freedom. Well, is this, what understanding of God is this that we have? So we have to question that. We have to question our understanding of the text. Is a text subject to interpretation? Is a text subject to contextualization or not? If you say
is it absolute?
That's right, you see. So I'm saying that to the extent that you say that this text is verbatim, literal, non-contextualized, I think that we are going to be constantly faced with kinds of anachronisms where you will have a medieval mentality in the 21st century.
In Guyana, there's another form of rape, I believe. It's called incest, father-child. The one that is less likely to be reported. How serious do you think that problem is?
From all information that I receive, I think it is very prevalent and very serious. And again, it's only education, because you see, that's why we at the time of Navratra and Diwali, I try to use this occasion, because here we focus on God as woman, and I'm telling Hindus, because I see those as part of our problem too. It is not other people's problem; it's our problem. So if we see God as woman, and there's a particular time in the Navrat where we bring a female child, and in almost a baby, and we literally do her puja in exactly the same way as we do the puja at the murti with the female child. See, if this child represents purity, innocence, vulnerability, right, in its utmost sense, what does it mean to us when we say we worship God in this form? So the molestation of the physical molestation of this being, so we bring the contrast to people's minds. Here on the one hand, we're talking about God in this form, and here on the other hand, this very God we molest.
What role should religion play, and all the religions, in this fight against rape and other forms of sexual violence?
Well, Chris, I really can't speak of other religions, because from the understanding, some religions have a hierarchy. A woman, for example, one man, I think in one letters, there's a hierarchy. The man is the head of the household, yet everybody is equal. I don't understand that argument. If you say the man is a hierarchical head of the household, and but there's equality between male and female, to me that's a contradiction. So to that extent, because I hear religious people argue about the dominance of the man in the family, right? And I shudder at that concept. So to that extent, I feel they may have a very limited role to play in creating a consciousness and making a transformation. But I believe on the whole religion should, because if we talk about decency, about morality, about justice, about truth, about non-injury, ahimsa, about compassion and about love, why don't we extend all of these things without any conditions?
Take your temple, your stream in the temple. Can you have a woman leader?
Yes. And that is becoming more and more a reality now in our society.
So we have, what would you call a female Swami?
In Guyana, no, not that.
No, I'm talking about it, not here, but I'm
Oh yeah. There are many.
What do you call them?
They're called Swaminis.
Swami?
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Recently we had one who came to Guyana through the Chinmaya mission. Yeah, we do have them.
So there's no distinction, male and female.
they're there.
And there's absolute equality.
Yeah.
So far as that is possible.
As a matter of fact, well, not only as far as it's possible, some of the, all of these great spiritual people like Sai Baba and so on, we have the female counterparts of them. Anandamai, who was located in Varanasi, Ammaji, she has a completely world following, and it is interesting to see how she is able to make an impact, on this whole male-female kind of thing.
You say that religions have a major role to play in this issue of sexual violence, including rape, but you suggest you might have some difficulties working with particular religion?
Yes, because if they're going to equivocate on this issue and say that perhaps it is permissible to beat a woman, or it is, the man is the head of the household and that has certain implications, then there will be some issues there for me.
You wouldn't like to name any religion you'd find difficulty working with?
Well, I mean, in Guyana, the way it at least been presented to me, both Islam and Christianity, but within them there are certain, for example, Catholics, I have no problem with their perspective on sexual orientation, on the rights of women, though of course the Catholic Church has a certain hierarchy. The people who are here in Guyana, they seem pretty open, and I have my Catholic friends in the United States among whom are women, and they are also calling, some of them have been bold enough to separate from the Catholic Church. But where you have any religion, and I think among them the Pentecostals are perhaps stronger where it concerns the dominance of the man, I'll have some problem there. I mean, but it's all a process of educating one another. I'm not drawing a line, say that I have nothing to do with you.
Just a few seconds more, but are you working with any other religious denomination, any other religious group in promoting and this fight against domestic violence?
Yes, we are. To the extent the IRO, the Interreligious Organization of Guyana, does reflect on this thing to talk about it. But my position sometimes officially differs from theirs when it comes to like sexual orientation. Right? I am part of the group, and I make my position known to them and publicly when there's a difference. For example, they had their perspective on homosexuality, and I told them I do not agree with that, and I publicly stated what was my position on homosexuality.
Swami Aksharananda, thank you very much for appearing on Plain Talk this evening, and good luck. And I hope we can have more of these conversations in future.
Thank you very much.
Operators and viewers, thank you. Good night. Next week, I'll have a representative from the Muslim community giving their perspective on the question of rape and domestic violence generally.